Baljinder Rathour, Director Law Immigration. As you know, we have been dealing in investor, entrepreneurs and settlement in United Kingdom. Within this series today I'm having Mr. Richard with me. Welcome, Richard. And you are also dealing in property investments, and of course that is a good area for Asian market as well, within United Kingdom and even overseas who want to come and settle here. This property investment is a big area in which they might be have an interest. So just tell me something about yourself and your company first.
Certainly. So Baljinder, I bought my first investment property in 1997 at the tender age of 24. Prior to that I'd been working as an insurance broker in the city. And I'd learnt one thing from that experience, that I would never do that again. And 24 I resigned and I went and I bought my first property and I did it up and I sold it, and I made more money in 6 months than I had in the previous 18, and that was it. I was hooked. And for the last 19 years I've been involved in property in one way or another. And I've done pretty much everything. You know, I've been a residential landlord, I've been a developer, I ran a design and build company in West London. I do HMO, which is houses in multiple occupation, and most recently I've got involved in this small chain of hotels, which is why we're here today, to discuss that.
Now, as you have been in different all areas of property, whether it's development or whether it's reselling or renting or letting whatsoever, what inspired you to move towards this hotel idea, this studio idea?
That's a great question. So what I find is that most people, when they first get into property, they go into the residential sector. They go into the residential sector because that's the sector that most people are in, and they feel secure because there's numbers there. And also there's a lot of education available now. There's a lot of companies running seminars on how to invest and creative investing strategies, and the vast majority of those teach residential property. So I go to a lot of networking. If I go to a networking event with say 100 people, there'll be 98 people in residential and 2 in commercial. I like the odds of being 2 in 100. You have more choice, there's more opportunity, and if you understand commercial property, there's just as much, if not more money to be made than there is in residential. So that's why after 19 years in the residential sector, I've made the swap over to the commercial sector.
So this hotel rooms, because there is a concern about residential as well when we talk about entrepreneurs and investment. So these properties will be considered as commercials, not as residentials.
Correct, correct. Okay, so here's the other thing. Let's face it. Over the course of the last 12 months, our government has made it absolutely clear that they are not fans of entrepreneurs in the residential property sector. Yeah, they've put in a number of changes which is making residential investment quite a hostile environment, particularly for people who've built up large portfolios. So this is one of the great strengths of the opportunity that I'm offering, which I'll give some more detail on in a moment, is that it's in the commercial property sector. The many changes that have been introduced or were introduced by George Osborne over the last 12 months simply don't apply. So it's a lot more conducive to investment.
So coming to your current project, what exactly this project is and how you're going to be competitive with your other chains within the market?
Okay. So what we do is we operate apart hotels. And apart hotels are effectively blocks of serviced accommodation. So they're studios, like hotel suites. And we operate them in exactly the same way as hotels are operated, because they are hotels. It's the same class, it's C1. So we offer self-contained accommodation for people who are visiting. In this case, this opportunity that we're going to talk about today is in Great Yarmouth in Norfolk. So people who are visiting Great Yarmouth, they have a choice of accommodation between a hotel room which is simply a room with an ensuite. And then, then if they're going to eat, they need to eat out all the time, versus our accommodation, which is self-contained. So there's an ensuite room, there's a kitchen, there's a living area, and people can relax and prepare their own food and stay for longer. So it's an apart hotel project.
So it's not only a room, it is a complete studio
It's
flat.
a complete studio, correct. So the establishment is called the Midland Apart Hotel, and we have 28 studios that we manage there. And what we're doing is we are selling those studios to investors with a guaranteed return. So we have 28 studios that are for sale for £55,000 each. In fact, 18 have already been sold to investors. And the ownership model is simple. So let me go through that. An investor buys a 125-year lease on a studio. Let's say Studio 101. Yeah? So the investor buys a 125-year lease on Studio 101. At the same time, the investor signs a 10-year sublease which returns control of that studio to us, the developers. And as the developers and hotel owners, we then operate that studio throughout the year, or throughout, in this case, the 10 years of the investment, and we generate some profit. And from that profit, we pay the investor their return. And in this case, that's a guaranteed return of 10% per annum.
From the start of the hotel.
From the day the hotel opens, correct. So at the moment, the building exists. It's a beautiful Victorian building, and it's been a hotel since the 1960s, but it's tired. It's probably 2-star accommodation at best, because the previous owner didn't reinvest any of the profit that he made in sort of modernization and so on and so forth.
So moving forward, till the hotel opens, they get some percentage for that one.
Thank you. Yes. So what we need to do is we need to close down the existing operation, and we need to do a refurb. It's quite a substantial refurb. The budget is round about £400,000, and that's going to take about 6 months. So when that refurb is finished, the hotel opens its doors for trading, and from that day, the investor starts receiving a return of 10% per annum. Prior to that, so during refurb, say for example, you have an investor who buys a studio and we complete in the middle of January. So between the middle of January and June, July of this year, when we plan to open the hotel, the investor will receive 5% on their money, because it's just holding. Then as soon as the hotel opens its doors for trading, that return goes up to 10%. And we pay that return for up to the next 10 years. So if we break that down somewhat financially, it's a 10-year investment, or possibly a 10-year and 6-month investment. And the investor receives 10% per year for each of those 10 years. So over the course of 10 years, an investor receives 100% return. And then at the end of 10 years, we'll buy that studio back from the investor at 120% of purchase price. So actually after 10 years, you make 120%, and that's a net return. So that's net of all expenses, but before taxes. Taxes are down to the investor to deal with in their tax return. I don't want to get bogged down in that. But the 10% return is net of all expenses. So as the hotel operator, we pay all the maintenance, the management fees, utilities, marketing, etc., etc., etc. We pay that out of the money that we make over and above the 10% that we pay the investor.
Now, coming to the investors, there could be two types of investors. One are locals, UK nationals or maybe Europeans. Another could be people who want to come from overseas as on an entrepreneurship visa and looking for settlement. Uh, Now there is a 5 years exit plan as well. For example, in 5 years they get the
Correct.
indefinite leave to remain, and after 5 years they want to get their money back. So
Correct.
that,
So let's talk about exit.
yeah,
So actually an investor can exit at any time they like because they are buying a lease. Exactly the same as if they bought a lease on a flat or a shop in London, which they can sell any time through an agent. They can do exactly the same with this. So I can sell you a studio, Studio 101. You become the proud owner of Studio 101. And then in a month's time, you're at dinner with a friend and you're talking about this new investment. And the friend says, oh, I'll buy that off you for 60K. You can sell it to him. No problem.
but here's
The
a sign
only
that
restriction
the reason-
is that the sublease
has to be
that I talked about, which basically gives us control of the studio to manage it, goes with that sale. So any new owner will earn 10% on the original purchase price, which is 55,000, not on their purchase price, 60,000. So then they end up with like an 8 or a 9% return, which is still a very competitive return. So this is one exit. Sell it to a friend, sell it to a business colleague, something of this ilk.
even 5% of return is, I think, more than the money kept in the bank.
Yeah, it's 500%, isn't it, of bank return?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
that money is they put in a bank. They don't
Yeah.
get that much of interest,
That's right.
which you are offering in
That's
the 5%.
Bank, you get 1%. We're offering 10.
10
Okay.
and 5 till the hotel
And
starts.
5 until the hotel opens.
Yes, just if you can revive this exit plan.
Sure. So there's the exit anytime strategy, and then the first prescribed exit is at 5 years. So 5 years from the date the hotel opens, you can phone me up and you can say, Richard, I want to sell my studio. And I say, no problem. I pick up my phone and I go to my network. And I phone them up and I say, who'd like to buy a studio at the Midland Apart Hotel in Great Yarmouth? Here are the figures. This is how well it's doing. It costs £60,000 and it gets a 10% return, a 9% return, a 12% return, whatever it takes
At that time.
to sell it at that time, because we don't know what the climate will be like in 5 years' time. But you know, a 10% return is historically always been good. Yeah. So let's say we sell it for 60,000 with a 10% return. We guarantee that you receive 110% of your purchase price
After 5 years.
after 5 years. So you buy for 55,000, you will get £60,500 after 5 years, which is 55,000 plus 10%, which is 5,500. That's the math. £60,500. That's what you'll receive after 5 years. And then the final exit strategy is what we call a buyback. So after 10 years, we guarantee to buy back your studio for 120% of the original purchase price. And actually we both sign agreements which say that I can come to you and say, Baljinder, I'm going to buy that studio back now and you have to sell it to me. And after 10 years, you can come to me and say, Richard, I want you to buy the studio back now and I have to buy it from you. Yeah? It's called a call and a put option. But really, it's just an agreement. It's just an agreement like any other agreement, which says that after 10 years, the studio will change hands one way or the other. As a sort of follow-on to that, after 10 years, if you don't want to sell it and we don't want to buy it, we will negotiate a new contract, a new 5-year contract, but we'll negotiate that at the time. But it's unlikely because our intention is to return the ownership of the studios to ourselves after that 10-year period.
But
That's the intention.
yeah, but at the same time, there will be new projects coming up because you're looking for a chain,
Yeah.
and there will be a probability of reinvestment in the new projects.
Yeah, that's a great point. So our goal does not end with 2 hotels in Great Yarmouth, which is what we own at the moment. Yeah, our goal is actually to build the UK's largest chain of apart hotels over the course of the next 5 years. And so if you want to exercise an assisted resale after 5 years on the Midland Apart Hotel in Great Yarmouth, and you want to reinvest in something else, then we'd be delighted for you to reinvest in us. And there will always be more opportunities for you to invest in. Likewise, at the end of 10 years, when we buy that studio back from you at 120%, you can take that money and you can just buy another hotel room or another studio from us in another development. So if you like 10%, then there will always be more opportunities for you to earn that.
Risk factors, I mean, that's what every investor looks
Sure.
forward for. So, I mean, if what is your research regarding the occupancy in future that you guarantee that 10% of
Sure.
return?
Another great question. Okay, risk required. Our calculations, our feasibility study shows that we need an average occupancy across the year of 49%. And that's 49% at the lowest price that we charge per night, which is £48. So that's our low season charge. So it's 49% occupancy at our low season charge. Of course, in high season, the summer, which is when we plan to open next year, our occupancy rate will be less because our room rate will be circa £55 per night, perhaps even 60, depending on demand. So if you have a look at a website called Visit Britain, they have they collate data on hotel and guest house and B&B occupancy or serviced accommodation occupancy across the country. And every barometer, every measurement of hotel occupancy for hotels with 25 to 50 keys, which the Midland Apart Hotel falls into, Seaside, East Midlands, etc., all the criteria that our hotel falls into, occupancy is at least 60% over the last 12 months. Some measurements are as high as 85, most are in the 70s. So we have lots of cover on on statistics. So over the last 12 months, we will have paid our return very easily. Now, let's take into account the fact that the UK just voted for Brexit, which has seen quite a substantial fall in the pound, which means two things. That more UK residents will stay in the UK for their holidays, which is good for Great Yarmouth because it's a holiday destination, and more people will come to the UK for their holidays because they're less expensive, which is also good for Great Yarmouth. So we predict that the occupancy rates over the next 12 months will increase substantially. And as I said before, we only need 49%, and occupancy over the last 12 months by any measurement has been significantly in excess of that 49%. So we're very confident we'll hit those figures. Now, having said that, any investment that offers a 10% return, of course, comes with an element of risk. Of course, there's an element of risk. If you don't want any risk at all, you must leave your money in the bank or in bonds, both of which incidentally can go bust, and then you get 1%. So you have to accept some element of risk. In addition to that, actually, we guarantee that you'll receive 10% return. So what does that mean? That means that, for example, in the first year, let's say we fall short of 49% occupancy and we only get 45. We will top up the funds required for the return with the proceeds from the sale of the rooms. So the sale of the rooms will produce a contingency fund held within the company, and any shortfalls will top up. So you will get your 10%. Even if we have to put our hand in our own pockets, you will get your 10%. So those are the risks. You have to accept some risk because it's a 10% return. But what is that risk? The risk is that we don't get 49% occupancy, which we're very confident that we will. And even if we don't get 49%, we say that we'll top it up. And the risk is, do you believe us?
Occupancy depends on, I think, two factors. Although I'm not talking on the basis of research, but the conversation with you. One is the location of the property, and another is the price of the rooms.
Right.
So just tell me how we compete with the local.
Great. So part of our strategy is that we mirror Premier Inn. Premier Inn is a very successful, rapidly growing hotel chain in the UK, and they have a very good due diligence department. You don't see many Premier Inns, if any, closing down. They really crunch their data, they really do their research and make sure that wherever they build, there will be good demand and they'll get good occupancy rates. So it was hugely encouraging for us because, of course, in 2014, Premier Inn built an 80-room hotel in Great Yarmouth.
The same area.
Which is where we have our two hotels. We're in Great Yarmouth. What's more, I read in the press recently that Best Western are also looking for a site to build in Great Yarmouth to cater for substantial demand for good quality, reasonably priced accommodation, which is what we offer.
The demand is there.
The demand is there for good quality, reasonably priced accommodation. Yeah? So, our hotels are in a better location than Premier Inn. We are 100 meters from the beach, second row. Some of our rooms have sea views. Premier Inn is 15 minutes walk from the beach. So we're in a better location. We offer better accommodation because Premier Inn only offers an ensuite room. We offer a suite. We offer a studio. And we charge less money. So Premier Inn is circa £60 plus per night, and we're charging 48 as a baseline. So better accommodation in a better location for less money than our competition, we feel is a really surefire way to fulfill our obligations to our investors.
Yes, Richard, your final word to our investors, whether they are local or they are from overseas, what you would bring, although your every word has been inspiring as far as the investors are concerned, but yeah, a final brief.
Thank you. Yeah. So a final word. I've been involved in the property industry for 19 years. I've worked with lots of different people on lots of different projects, and they've all gone extremely well. And I feel now very, very passionately about the project that lies before us, because I really believe in it. I wouldn't be sat here with Baljinder in front of a camera talking about this if I didn't really believe in the success of this project. We have 28 studios at the Midland Apart Hotel, 18 of which have already been bought by investors. So 18 people believe in this project enough to put forward their money to receive a return. We're looking for 10 more investors or fewer to buy the final 10 studios. This is a great investment. The return is great, 10% regularly each year, paid quarterly in arrears into your account, and then you'll get some capital appreciation after 5 years or an exit at 10 years. So you get great returns, and those returns are net of all expenses, and it's entirely passive. So unlike in your buy-to-let investment, for example, where you get phone calls from agents, you get phone calls from tenants, you have to change the boiler, you have to change the carpets, you have to repaint, all those things, you don't have any of that here. We take care of all of that for you. All you get is your return dropping into your account quarterly, and by all means contact Baljinder if you'd like more information, if you'd like to see a full prospectus, or you'd like to have a conversation with me, then please get in touch with Baljinder, and he'll put us together.
Thank you very much, Richard, for being on the show. And we do welcome investors on your project. Thank you so much.